Hello, this is CherylMarlene, and this is Spiritual Deep Dive. In this episode, I share a Q&A from a recent Akashic Record Insights workshop. This discussion began with this question from a participant.
What is the impact of trauma intergenerationally?
You have a couple of hours? So there's a lot of things that they could address. And what they want to address in this moment is that the biggest habit or the biggest impact intergenerationally is that trauma becomes perceived as a habit. That you have to respond, that in any moment something crappy is going to happen. And so you've got to do whatever you've got to do to protect yourself. Right. And that the habit then of protecting yourself is something that becomes, like second nature, that you don't stop and think about, is this something I really need to do? It challenges you then to it challenges you then that habit then challenges you to find a new perspective. Because if you are unquestioning in the idea that you need to always protect yourself, then that's what lies at the foundation of all of your experience and all of your choice and all that you decide about what's true for you. But if you can question the premise that you must protect yourself, you begin to work it out into a place where it's no longer reactionary and it becomes more responsive, right? Like it comes more out of your choice, right? Like if because of the trauma that you and the generations before you have experienced feel like people are always going to be mean, and if you're not careful, they'll hit you, right? Like if that's the belief, that's the habit, then whenever you're around some other people, you may always have this sense of needing to hold yourself in and protect yourself, even when nobody's going to hit you. So if you begin to look at it and to think about those kinds of like experiences that we typically don't think of, right? Like it's a physical response, it's a somatic response that we don't question. But when we do start questioning it, we start to see, oh my gosh, in that situation, I really didn't have any need to be protective with myself like that. So that you then begin little by little pulling apart the threads of the habit and not being and making choice about how you respond rather than just blindly reacting. And then that starts to break down the energy of the habit till you get to the point where you probably don't have the habit anymore. So in a certain sense, the effect intergenerationally of trauma is that you can end up with what we would call, like, say, post-traumatic stress without understanding why you feel the stress. So if you start looking at where the stress is coming from you, you can start to realize that for you, it's really not your stress. You may not know exactly where it comes from. You may not know that it's intergenerational. That doesn't matter. It's that you're identifying that reaction wasn't really your true reaction. That if you had stopped to think about it, you would choose something differently. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I was thinking about the genocide in Rwanda about 15, 20 years ago, where the Hutus and the Tutsis basically massacred each other, and
Yep.
they've made huge strides at reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think they have a parliament with a majority women now. Yeah.
That's
So
taking
I
care
mean,
of things.
that's only one way, but they've really made efforts to reconcile and to make sure that nothing like that would ever happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered how possible it is to reconcile without it showing up in some way in future generations, without the trauma of that.
Well, what they would say about like what's happened there in Rwanda is that the thing that was, let's say, maybe different or unusual is the willingness to publicly identify the problem. Right? So they're not like scrapping the whole event out of their history books, and they're not talking to their children about it, and they're not talking to each other about it, right? Like they haven't hidden it. And because they haven't hidden it, they're dealing with, let's say, the consequences of all of it, like much more in, like, say, real time. So that in a certain sense, the habit that might come out of that is not being, that's not what's being like indoctrinated. And so it means then that the whole historical, like ancestral legacy type of motion around all of that is going to be very, very, very different, because in a sense, what the legacy that's being created is to look it square in the face and call it what it is without blaming, which ends up being a huge key, because blame is one of the best ways to create a habit that over the generations pushes the generations apart, or causes trouble from one generation to another. So it, and so then it, what remains to be determined is how the different generations decide to go from that, and whether or not they like maintain the integrity that's been established. And because it's a heavy deal, and there are plenty of people who don't want to deal with that level of intensity. So there might, they don't think so, but there is the possibility of sort of a, I don't know, reversion into the old way. But that's, like that's a really good experience or example of the positiveness that comes, or, let's go with positiveness that comes out of not ignoring, not denying, and instead looking at it straight on and being honest with yourself and others about what it is. And then that in a sense creates its own habit, but it's not a habit of repression. It's a habit of openness. It's a happy, it's a habit of, it's okay for us to individually and as a group acknowledge what happened. Thank you for listening. This has been an episode of Spiritual Deep Dive. For more, visit my website at CherylMarlene.com or see my article and workbook library at spiritualdeepdive.com. To join the next Akashic Record Insights workshop, visit AkashicRecordInsights.com.